The emergency alarm was screaming bloody murder, but all Captain Marcus Kane could focus on was the alien fortress filling his view screen. His ship, the Stellar Wanderer, was getting dragged through a forbidden sector of space by some freak gravity well, and the red alert lights flashing across the cockpit weren't helping his headache. He yelled at the ship's computer for a status report, wiping sweat from his brow. The AI's calm voice listed off the damage: multiple systems down, navigation fried, and hull integrity at 47% and falling fast. He watched, completely powerless, as the massive crystalline structure, a place that twisted the laws of physics, pulled his ship in for a very rough landing. This was Zorathian territory, the one place every pilot in the Alliance is warned to stay away from. These guys were a warrior race, and they didn't exactly put out a welcome mat for trespassers. The Wanderer screamed as it tore through the fortress's energy shield. Marcus fought the controls with everything he had, but the final crash sent him flying, and the world went black. He woke up on a floor as smooth and dark as obsidian, his wrists clamped in humming energy cuffs. The room he was in was unlike anything human-made. The walls seemed to flow like liquid, and the light bent in ways that made his head spin. "The intruder is awake," a voice echoed, speaking perfect, if accented, standard English. Marcus looked up and found himself surrounded by Zorathian soldiers. Each one was nearly 7 feet tall, covered in biomechanical armor that shimmered like an oil slick, and holding a very scary-looking energy rifle pointed right at him. "Hey fellas, this is all just a big misunderstanding," Marcus said, trying to flash his best disarming smile. "My ship went haywire. I had no intention of crashing your party." "Silence," the leader snapped. "You can explain it to the Warlord." They yanked him up and marched him down hallways that felt alive, almost like they were breathing. Every Zorathian they passed, warriors, scientists, officials, stopped and stared at the human prisoner. The files the Alliance had on this species didn't do them justice. They moved with the lethal grace of a predator, with sharp angled features and skin that seemed to glow from within. The massive doors to the throne room dissolved into mist as they approached, and Marcus felt his heart jump into his throat. The chamber was enormous, with a ceiling so high it was lost in shadow, and pillars of living crystal pulsed with soft light. On a throne at the far end, one that looked like it had been grown instead of built, sat a figure that made every alarm bell in his body go off. She was beautiful, but in the same way a supernova is beautiful, terrifying, powerful, and absolutely deadly. Her skin was the color of a pale pearl, a stark contrast to the jet-black battle armor she wore. Her hair was like liquid silver, and her eyes were the color of a dying star, a brilliant burning blue that promised nothing but destruction. "A human pilot," Warlord Caraxia said, her voice dripping with an authority that could command armies. "He thinks he can just waltz across our borders without consequence." The guards shoved Marcus to his knees. He looked up at her, trying to figure out if he could talk his way out of this one, but her face was a perfect mask. Those star-bright eyes scanned him like he was some strange new bug. "Your Excellency," Marcus started, trying to remember the proper protocol. "I deeply apologize for the intrusion. My ship had a complete navigation failure." "Your intentions don't matter," Caraxia interrupted, standing and descending from her throne with the fluid grace of a panther. "You are here. That is the only thing that matters." The court was silent, dozens of advisors and officers watching them. Marcus saw a few of them exchange nervous looks. Clearly the Warlord in a bad mood was bad news for everyone. "So tell me, human," she said, circling him slowly. "What should I do with you? The law is very clear. The punishment for trespassing in Zorathian space is death. Quick. Simple." "Wow, that seems a little harsh for a wrong turn," Marcus said before he could stop himself. "You guys don't have, like, a cosmic parking ticket or something first?" The throne room fell so quiet you could hear a pin drop. A few of the guards actually flinched. Caraxia stopped right in front of him. You make jokes when you are about to die? She asked, tilting her head. It's a human thing, Marcus shrugged. We get terrified, we get sarcastic. It's a defense mechanism. To his utter shock, he saw the corner of her lips twitch. How strange. She started circling him again, and Marcus found himself mesmerized. She moved like a dancer and a hunter all at once. The armor she wore was incredibly detailed, with patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the light. You know, his mouth said, apparently on a mission to get him killed. For someone about to have me executed, you're really putting on a show. The dramatic walk, the slow circle, the whole I am your doom vibe. It's great theater. Caraxia paused behind him. Are all humans so casual about their own end? Just the pilots, Marcus shot back. We get used to near-death experiences. Though I'll admit, they don't usually involve such an attractive executioner. What did I just say? The silence was somehow even heavier now. Marcus could feel every single pair of alien eyes drilling into him. He'd definitely crossed a line. Or three. She moved back in front of him, her face impossible to read. Attractive? Well, yeah, objectively speaking. Marcus knew he should shut up, but he couldn't. The whole warrior goddess thing you've got going on really works. The armor, the silver hair, the I can vaporize you with a thought look. It's intimidating, but in a good way. An old Zarathian in fancy robes stepped forward. My warlord, shall we proceed with the sentence before this human embarrasses himself further? Caraxia held up a hand, silencing him instantly. Tell me, human pilot, she said, her stunning eyes locked on his. Do you fear death? Of course I do, Marcus answered honestly. But fear doesn't change what's coming. So you can either face it with dignity, or, in my case, with bad jokes and poorly timed compliments. She reached down and took his chin in her hand, forcing him to look at her. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, but he could feel immense power behind it. Most prisoners beg for their lives. You just keep talking. Would begging work? Marcus asked. No. Then I'll stick with the jokes. At least I'll go out entertained. She let him go. The entire court held its breath. You know, Marcus added, because why stop now? Back home, when someone captures you and ties you up, they usually buy you dinner first. This is all a little forward for a first date. A young officer nearby made a choking noise. Suddenly, the whole fortress shook violently. Red lights started flashing everywhere, and alarms blared. A voice over the comms yelled, Warlord, we are under attack! An unknown fleet has breached our defenses! Caraxia's entire demeanor changed. The theatrical warlord vanished, replaced by a hardened commander. To your stations! She roared. Another blast rocked the throne room, sending debris raining from the ceiling. In the chaos, Marcus's energy cuffs flickered and died. He was free. He could have run, but he saw a massive crystal pillar tipping over, about to crush Caraxia. He didn't even think. He dove, tackling her out of the way, just as it smashed into the spot where she'd been standing. She stared at him, shocked. You saved me. Yeah, well, Marcus said, getting to his feet. Seemed like a waste to let my attractive executioner get squashed. Explosions echoed from the hangar bay. Your fleet is being torn apart, an officer shouted. This is a massacre. Caraxia looked from the chaos to Marcus. Why? Because nobody gets to kill me but you, Marcus said with a grin. And I think you just lost your chance. She came to a halt right in front of him, staring down with an expression he just couldn't figure out. The air between them was so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. Then, out of nowhere, she leaned in, her face just inches from his. Marcus's heart felt like it was going to pound right out of his chest as her warm breath tickled his ear. So tell me, human, she whispered, her voice so low it sent a strange shiver down his spine. What would you do if I decided not to kill you? Marcus swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. He was intensely aware of how close she was. the faint exotic scent coming off her, and the way the strange lights of the room danced across her sharp features. His mind raced, trying to find something to say that wouldn't get him instantly turned to ash. He'd probably say something dumb, he thought. She leaned back just a bit, and those cosmic eyes of hers drilled right into him. And then, because Marcus Kane had a bad habit of making terrible situations even worse with his smart mouth, he looked the most feared military commander in 3-star systems square in the eye and said, "You know, you'd make a really cute wife." A deafening silence fell over the throne room. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop in a black hole. Every single guard, noble, and advisor was frozen solid. An old counselor's mouth hung open, flopping silently like a fish out of water. One of the younger guards was so shocked he actually dropped his plasma rifle. Caxia herself just stood there, completely still, her face shifting from surprise to confusion to something else Marcus couldn't quite put his finger on. For what felt like an eternity, they just stared at each other. There was the human pilot who had just gleefully signed his own death warrant, and the alien warlord who was holding the pen. Then very slowly, her lips curled into a smile that was 1 part playful and 2 parts deadly. "Guards," she said, her eyes never leaving Marcus's. "Clear the throne room." "My lady," the old advisor sputtered, "surely you don't mean everyone?" Her tone left absolutely no room for argument. In seconds, the massive hall was empty. Soldiers and courtiers scurried out, shooting nervous looks over their shoulders and whispering to each other. The giant doors thudded shut behind them with a sound like the final click of a lock on a tomb. Suddenly, Marcus was all alone with the warlord, still on his knees, still in chains, and despite that little smile on her face, still in a whole lot of trouble. "Do you have any idea," she said, her tone as casual as if they were talking about the weather instead of his execution, "that in my 3 centuries of life, nobody has ever said something so completely insane to me?" "Well, I'm honored to be the first," Marcus managed to squeak out. She actually laughed, a real full laugh this time. "You humans, so tiny, so breakable, and so entertaining." She tapped a control on her throne, and the energy cuffs around his wrists fizzled out. "Get up." Marcus pushed himself to his feet, trying to get the feeling back in his legs. With everyone gone, the throne room felt even bigger, even more alien. The glowing patterns on the walls seemed to pulse along with his racing heart. "You called me cute," Caxia said, the word sounding strange and new coming from her. "Explain what this means." "It's... Marcus rubbed his wrists, trying to think fast. "It means you're attractive, but in a way that's approachable. Not just scary, beautiful, or powerful, but something that makes a person want to smile. Although," he added quickly, "I'm just now realizing that calling the supreme commander of an alien empire cute might have been a bit of a cultural blunder." "And wife?" she asked. "I understand the human concept of a bonded pair, but why suggest it?" Marcus could feel his face getting hot. That was a joke, a really, really dumb joke, when human guys see an attractive woman. Sometimes we just say stuff like that. It's not supposed to be taken literally. "But you do find me attractive," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I mean, well," Marcus waved a hand vaguely in her direction. "Look at you. You're like, weaponized beauty. Even by human standards, you're..." "Choose your next words very, very carefully," she warned. But he could see the hint of a smile in those incredible eyes. "Remarkable," he finished. "Terrifyingly remarkable." She walked toward him, and with no guards around, Marcus suddenly felt very small and very alone. She was a few inches taller than him, forcing him to tilt his head up to meet her gaze. "You're interesting, Marcus Kane," she said, using his full name for the first time. He wondered how she knew it. "In all my years," she continued, "I have conquered planets, led armadas, and crushed rebellions. I've been feared, I've been respected, I've been obeyed, But no one has ever looked at me and thought, cute wife. To be fair, Marcus pointed out, I bet plenty of them thought it. They were just smart enough not to say it out loud. Perhaps, she mused, or perhaps they only saw the Warlord, and not the woman. There was something in her voice right then, a hint of what might have been loneliness, if a supreme alien commander could even feel something like that. Marcus found himself really looking at her, past the armor and the power, to the person underneath. So, what now? He asked. Is my execution still on the schedule, or did my complete lack of a survival instinct buy me some time? She began to circle him again, but this time it didn't feel like a predator sizing up its meal. It felt like she was genuinely considering him. That depends. Your ship is gone. Your government thinks you're dead. And you've seen the inside of our most secret base. I can't just let you go. So prison then? Of a sort, she said, stopping in front of him, her decision made. You will stay here, in the Citadel, as my guest. Guest sounds a lot like prisoner with better marketing. Would you rather have the dungeons? I hear they're quite drafty. Nope, no, guest is fine. Guest is great. Love being a guest. She flashed that dangerous smile again. You will be given your own quarters. You will not try to escape. You will not contact anyone. And you will have dinner with me every evening, where you will continue to entertain me with your human perspective. And if I say no, then you will discover why they call me a warlord, not a diplomat. Marcus thought about his options, which were basically zero. Do I at least get a tour? This place is amazing, even for a prison. It is not a prison, she corrected him. It is the Stellar Citadel, the heart of Zorathian power. And yes, you will see all of it. There isn't a single secret you could steal that would make a difference. Your little alliance could never dream of breaking through our defenses. That's comforting, Marcus said sarcastically. She went back to her throne and tapped another control. The massive doors slid open, and a single guard walked in, a Zorathian woman with markings that showed she was high-ranking. Commander Velith, Caxia said, escort our guest to the diplomatic suites in the northern spire. See to it that he has everything he needs. The commander's eyes went wide for just a second. The diplomatic suites, my lady? Did I stutter? No, my lady, right away. Just as Marcus was about to follow the commander out, Caxia's voice stopped him. Oh, and Marcus? He turned back. She was watching him with that same unreadable look. The next time you decide to comment on my marital prospects, she said, her voice light but her eyes sharp. Just remember something. Zorathian wedding ceremonies involve a lot more bloodshed than your human ones. Got it, Marcus said, his voice a little shaky. Good. I'll see you at dinner. Try not to propose again before then. As Commander Velith led him away, Marcus saw Caxia leaning back on her throne, that small, mysterious smile still on her lips. The doors sealed them off, and he was left wondering what fresh hell he had just stumbled into. You do realize, Commander Velith said as they walked down hallways that seemed to be alive, that you're the first prisoner in 300 years to leave the Warlord's throne room alive after an audience like that. Lucky me, Marcus mumbled. Indeed, the commander said. Then she stopped and looked at him. When the doors were sealed, did you think it was for your execution? The commander almost looked like she felt sorry for him. When a Zorathian leader seals the doors to the throne room, it's not for an execution. It means they've found something they want to keep. A chill shot down Marcus's spine that had nothing to do with the alien air. And what happens to the things she decides to keep? Well, Velith said with a look of sympathy, that depends entirely on how long you can keep her interested. As they walked deeper into the incredible fortress, Marcus had a sinking feeling that his dumb joke about marriage might have just been a prophecy. The most powerful woman in the known universe had basically just called dibs on him. And from the way she had smiled when he called her cute, He was pretty sure he was either the luckiest man alive or the most spectacularly doomed. Maybe both. The diplomatic suite was nothing like a prison cell. The walls glowed with soft, shifting light, and the surfaces looked like liquid metal, frozen in place. The place was bigger than his old apartment, with furniture that molded to his body, a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud, and a bathroom full of alien gadgets he was afraid to touch. "The Warlord expects you for dinner at sunset," Commander Valeth said before she left, sealing him inside his luxurious new cage. My life ended the day I was accused of being a spy. One minute, I was a simple survey pilot charting dead asteroids. The next, my ship was caught in the shadow of a fleet so massive it blocked out the stars. They belonged to Caxia, the Starbreaker, a warlord whose name was whispered in fear across the galaxy. I was dragged before her, a powerless human facing a goddess of war, and she found me guilty. But instead of death, she gave me a gilded cage. And that's when things got really strange. Stick with me, because how I went from her prisoner to the person who turned her entire empire on its head is a story you have to hear. My prison was a lavish suite with a balcony overlooking a city suspended in the void. It was a web of crystal and light, with ships buzzing between floating towers like metallic bees. That evening, a suit materialized in my room. It was made of something like liquid night, fitting me perfectly. Clearly formal wear, but made for a human. Someone had actually put thought into this. As I looked out at the star that served as their sun, painting space in hues of purple and gold, a pair of guards arrived. They led me through corridors I hadn't seen, past giant holographic maps showing fleets moving across the galaxy. The dining room was surprisingly intimate. Its walls were completely transparent, offering a 180-degree view of space, with a crystal table for two set in the center. Caxia was already there, and the sight of her almost made me trip over my own feet. The terrifying battle armor was gone, replaced by a gown that looked like it was woven from pure starlight. Her silver hair was styled in a way that showed off her elegant neck, and she looked less like a conqueror and more like a queen from a dream. "You're staring," she said, not even looking up from a report she was reading on a small hologram. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. "You're stunning. I mean, it's a very different look from this morning." She flicked the hologram away and finally met my eyes. "You clean up well yourself, human. The outfit suits you." "Thanks," I said, feeling my cheeks flush. "It's very form-fitting." "Zarathian fashion leaves little to the imagination," she replied, a faint smile on her lips. "We believe the body is a weapon. It should be displayed, not hidden." She gestured to the chair opposite hers. "Sit. We have much to discuss." As I sat, sleek robotic servants began bringing out plates of food. It was like nothing I had ever seen, colors and shapes that seemed to defy logic, but it all tasted incredible. One dish was like a mix of spiced honey and the crisp scent of ozone after a storm. "So," I started, trying to sound casual, "is this the part where you interrogate me for Alliance military secrets?" She raised an eyebrow. "Do you have any worth knowing?" "Not really. I was just a survey pilot." "Then we can skip the charade," she said, studying me. "Instead, tell me about your world." "Earth. It's a quaint name." I felt myself relax just a tiny bit. "What do you want to know?" She leaned forward, her starlight eyes fixed on me. "Everything. Your cultures, your wars, your art. I want to know how a species that just barely figured out faster than light travel has survived in a galaxy full of predators." "A whole lot of stubborn luck," I admitted with a shrug. "And we're pretty good at making friends. Or at least convincing other species that we're more useful alive. And yet, you couldn't convince me of that, could you?" A sly smile touched her lips. "I'm sitting here having dinner with you instead of floating in the void." "Fair point," I conceded. "Though your methods were a little unorthodox." We talked for hours. She was a surprisingly good listener, asking sharp questions about human history and art. In return, she told me about her people, a warrior race that prized honor and strength, but who also had a deep appreciation for poetry and science. It was a strange and fascinating contradiction. "Your species fascinates me," she finally said, as the robots cleared the last of the plates. "You're so fragile, but you've spread across the stars like a weed. You adapt, you negotiate, you survive through teamwork instead of conquest." "Hey, not all of us are into teamwork," I pointed out. "We've had our fair share of conquerors, too." "But not like us," she said, rising from the table and walking to the transparent wall. "We take what we want through strength. It is our way." "Is that why you kept me?" I asked, joining her at the window. "Because you wanted a pet human?" She turned, and her eyes were impossible to read. "Would that bother you?" "Depends on the benefits package," I quipped. "Do pets get hazard pay?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and adjusted the collar on my suit with a touch that was almost gentle. "You're not afraid of me," she observed. "I'm absolutely terrified of you," I corrected her. "I'm just good at hiding it." "No," she said, her voice soft. "Fear has a scent. You were afraid in the throne room this morning, but you're not afraid now. Why?" I thought about it. She commanded fleets that could wipe out entire planets. She could end my life with a single thought. Yet standing this close, I didn't feel fear. "Maybe," I said slowly, "it's because right now, you're not just the Warlord. You're just Caxia, having dinner with a guy who thinks you're ridiculously cute." She let out a sharp laugh. "That word again! You humans and your silly diminutives. Would you prefer devastatingly beautiful? Because that's also true." "Careful, Marcus. Flattery is a dangerous game to play with my kind." "Everything seems dangerous with your kind," I shot back. "Might as well enjoy the view before I get vaporized." She stepped closer, and I had to tilt my head back to look up at her. "What makes you think you're going to die?" she asked, her voice low. "Historical precedent? The fact that I know the location of your secret military base? General pessimism?" She started circling me slowly, just like she had in the throne room, but this time the energy was completely different. "What if I offered you a choice?" she said. "Serve me willingly and live, or cling to your stubborn human independence and face the consequences." "Serve you how?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. "As my advisor on human nature, my guide to understanding your species." She stopped behind me, and I could feel her breath on my neck. "My companion." The word hung in the air between us. "That's a very loaded term," I managed to say. "Is it?" she murmured, coming around to face me again. "You said I'd make a cute wife. Perhaps I'm curious what kind of husband a human would make." "That was a joke. Was it?" She tilted her head. "Your pupils dilated when you said it. Your heart rate increased. Your pheromones shifted. All biological signs of genuine attraction." My jaw dropped. "You can sense all that?" "I can sense many things," she said, leaning in until our faces were inches apart, "including the fact that your attraction has only grown stronger, even after knowing what I am." I swallowed hard. Maybe I have a thing for dangerous women. A slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. "Clearly. Go back to your quarters. Think about my offer. Tomorrow, I will show you more of my citadel. Perhaps that will help you decide." "And if I say no?" Her smile turned sharp as a knife's edge. "Then we'll find out how long your sense of humor lasts, in a much less comfortable setting." Her guards appeared out of nowhere to lead me away. But just as I reached the door, Caxia's voice called out, "Oh, and Marcus? Sweet dreams." The way she said it sent a chill down my spine. The next morning, I was woken up by her second-in-command, a stern woman named Velith. "The Warlord requests your presence for the morning inspection," she announced, handing me a new, military-style uniform. You are to observe how we maintain order. I dressed, my mind reeling from the night before. Serve her or die. But it felt like so much more than that. Velith led me to a hangar bay the size of a city, where thousands of soldiers stood in perfect, terrifying formation. Caxia was on a raised platform, back in her full battle armor, looking every bit the supreme commander. She gave me a tiny nod and then addressed her army in their native tongue, which sounded like music made from clashing swords. She's warning them about increased rebel activity in the outer sectors. Velith translated quietly beside me. Some of the newer colonies are getting restless. As I watched Caxia, I saw the absolute worship in her soldiers' eyes, but I also saw something else. Quick, worried looks exchanged between her top officers, a tension that she didn't seem to notice. After the inspection, Caxia strode over to us. "Commander, you're dismissed. I'll handle our guests' education personally today." Velith saluted and left, but not before shooting me a look that was pure pity. "Thoughts?" Caxia asked as we walked away. "Your troops adore you," I said honestly, "but some of your officers are scared. Those rebels are a bigger problem than you let on, aren't they?" She gave me a sharp, impressed look. "Perceptive. There are always those who believe I've grown soft, that we should be conquering more, not consolidating." She led me into a private training room filled with weapons. "Take off your jacket." "Excuse me?" "You wanted to understand my culture. Combat is the heart of who we are. Take it off." I did as I was told, watching as she grabbed 2 long staves from the wall that hummed with energy. "I don't suppose you'd believe me if I told you I'm a pacifist," I said nervously. She just tossed one of the staves to me. "Defend yourself." And then she moved. It was like trying to fight a bolt of lightning. I barely got the staff up to block her first hit, and the impact rattled my bones. I'd had some basic self-defense training, but this was a whole other level. "Too slow," she grunted, sweeping my legs out from under me. I hit the mat with a thud, the wind knocked out of me. She stood over me, not even breathing hard. "The problem isn't the rebels," she said, her voice low and serious. "It's the man leading them. My top general, Malachor. He thinks like a Zarathian, brute force, direct assault. But you don't. You think like a human. You lie, you bluff, you find clever, unexpected ways to win. That's why you're here, Marcus. I don't need a pilot. I need a weapon he will never see coming." And in that moment, I finally understood. I wasn't her prisoner or her pet. I was her secret weapon. And my revenge on the man who put me in this position was going to be helping this terrifyingly beautiful woman save her entire empire. And you know what? I was actually starting to like the idea. Your species puts way too much faith in its toys, and not nearly enough in its own 2 hands. Well, our species also tries not to get into fistfights with apex predators, Marcus gasped, taking her offered hand to get back on his feet. The sparring session had dragged on for an hour, and while Marcus hadn't even come close to landing a single punch, he was starting to pick up on the rhythm of her attacks, the sheer artistry woven into the violence. She wasn't just knocking him around, she was giving him a lesson. She was showing him how a Zarathian thinks, moves, and thrives. "You learn fast, for a human," she finally said, not even breathing hard while Marcus felt like he'd just sprinted a marathon. "Thanks, I think," he wheezed. "Why do I get the feeling this is just another part of my job interview?" "Everything is an evaluation." She neatly put the training weapons back in their place. "How can I possibly trust someone who refuses to face me, even in a symbolic fight?" "So did I pass?" Marcus asked. "You didn't bolt. That's a start." She nodded for him to follow her. "Come on, there's a lot more to show you." The tour she gave him was mind-boggling. He saw the Tactical Command Center, where shimmering holographic maps tracked fleets across a dozen star systems. He walked through research labs where Zarathian scientists were developing technology that made the best Alliance gear look like it was carved from stone and wood. Then came the massive libraries, holding the entire history and culture of countless conquered worlds. You actually preserve their knowledge? Marcus asked, stunned, as they passed halls filled with alien relics. Of course, conquest without understanding is just mindless destruction. We're builders, not destroyers. Try telling that to the species you conquered, Marcus shot back. They're alive. They thrive under our rule. Isn't that a better alternative than being wiped out? It was one of those philosophical arguments with no right answer, but it peeled back another layer of her character. She wasn't just some warlord. She was a scholar, a soldier who truly believed she was protecting the very civilization she had built. Just as they stepped into what looked like her private art gallery, filled with masterpieces from every corner of the galaxy, alarms suddenly screamed through the citadel. Caraxia's face went rigid as she pressed a comms unit on her armor. The conversation was in her native tongue, but Marcus knew that tone anywhere. It was the sound of bad news arriving at high speed. When she cut the connection, her brilliant eyes were burning with an icy fire. What's wrong? An assassination attempt on one of my admirals. The rebels are getting cocky. She locked her gaze on him, and for a split second, he could see the gears turning in her mind. You wanted to learn about our politics? Well, you're about to get a crash course. She led him at a brisk pace, almost a run, to a chamber he hadn't seen yet, a war room where high-ranking officers were already gathered around a giant holographic table. They all threw curious looks at the humans standing among them, but one glance from Caraxia shut down any questions. Report, she ordered. Admiral Threx's flagship was sabotaged during a routine inspection, an officer stated. He made it, but just barely. Our intel points to the purist faction being behind it. The purists? Marcus whispered to Valith, who had quietly appeared beside him. They're ultra-nationalists, she explained in a low voice. They think the Warlord has gone soft on conquered species. They believe letting aliens into our military makes us weak. Your being here, it isn't winning them over. Marcus watched Caraxia absorb the news, her mind already mapping out strategies and consequences. When she finally spoke, her voice was laced with pure authority. Double the security detail on all senior staff. I want the people who did this found within one cycle, and put every known purist sympathizer under tighter surveillance. My lord, an older officer began cautiously, perhaps this is a sign that we should rethink some of our more recent policies. The integration of alien units, the human's presence. Are you suggesting I give in to terrorists, General Kress? The temperature in the room plummeted. No, my lord, not at all. Good. Because anyone who believes they can control me with violence is about to get a harsh lesson. You're all dismissed. As the officers quickly filed out, she turned back to Marcus. Still think I'm cute? Terrifyingly so, he admitted. To his surprise, she actually smiled. Come on, there's one more thing you need to see. She brought him to her private study, a room he knew very few people ever got to enter. Ancient weapons adorned the walls, and star charts were spread across every available surface. But what really grabbed his eye was a holographic map of a huge chunk of the galaxy, detailed with trade routes, fleet positions, and political borders. The rebels aren't my only headache, she said, her fingers dancing across the display. Your alliance is getting stronger. The consortium is expanding its reach, and our deep space scouts are worried about something stirring out in the void. Why are you showing me all this? Because change is on its way, whether we like it or not. She faced him, and for the first time he saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. My people. We've been conquerors for so long, we've forgotten how to be anything else. But maybe that has to change. And do you think I can help with that? You made me laugh, Marcus. Do you have any idea how rare that is? You looked at the most feared military leader in the known universe and saw a potential wife. She shook her head in disbelief. You either see things no one else does, or you are spectacularly insane. A little of both, Marcus offered. Perhaps. She glided closer, that predatory grace of hers never wavering. I've made a decision. You're staying. Not as a prisoner, but as my personal consultant. You're going to help me understand your people, and maybe teach me to see the galaxy from a different perspective. And if I say no, then you'll break my heart, she said, her tone dripping with mock sadness. And I'll be forced to toss you out of an airlock. A real tragedy. Well, when you put it like that, She reached up and gently touched his cheek. Her fingers were surprisingly warm. You intrigue me, Marcus Kane, more than you have any right to. That makes you either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous. Which one do you think I am? I haven't decided yet. She leaned in so close he could feel her breath on his skin. But I fully intend to find out. A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. Velith entered, looking regretful. My lord, the council demands to see you immediately. The Purist faction is calling for an emergency session. Caraxia sighed and pulled back. Of course they are. Marcus, you're coming with me. Let them see that their little scare tactics don't mean a thing. Is that a good idea? Velith asked nervously. Probably not. But then Wisdom and I have never been great friends. She gave Marcus a sharp, predatory smile. Besides, I'm dying to see the look on their faces when I introduce my new human advisor. As they walked toward the political firestorm brewing in the Citadel, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at how fast his life had turned upside down. He'd gone from prisoner to consultant, from a joke to whatever this was becoming. He'd called her his cute wife as a last-ditch effort to survive. Now, watching her prepare for a political showdown with the same fire she brought to a fight, he wondered if his subconscious knew something he didn't. Either way, he was in it now, serving an alien warlord who, for some reason, found him entertaining. He'd definitely had worse jobs. Probably. The council chamber exploded into chaos the second Marcus walked in behind Caraxia. Dozens of Zorathian nobles and military leaders shot to their feet, their normally melodic language twisting into angry, discordant shouts. How dare you bring that thing in here? General Cress's voice sliced through the noise. Into our most sacred chamber? Caraxia didn't break her stride. This thing is my advisor. He's staying. This is an outrage, yelled another noble, decked out in elaborate ceremonial armor. No alien has ever. Outrageous times call for outrageous measures. Caraxia cut him off, taking her seat at the head of the massive, crescent-shaped table. She motioned for Marcus to stand right beside her, a move that sent another shockwave of furious muttering through the room. A figure rose from the far end of the table. He was huge, even for a Zorathian, with a face mapped by the scars of 100 battles. His armor was marked with the sigil of the Purist faction, and his eyes burned with undisguised hatred. I am Voran Kral, he boomed, his glare locked on Marcus. And I speak for those who have not forgotten what made our empire strong. This pet of yours is a symbol of how far we have strayed. Choose your next words carefully, Voran. Caraxia's voice was deadly quiet. You're getting dangerously close to treason. Treason? Voran let out a harsh laugh. I serve the true Zorathian way. You're the one betraying our legacy, inviting weakness into our heart. First, the integration policies, and now this. Parading a human before this council like some kind of prize. Marcus could feel the tension in the room becoming thick enough to choke on. Every single eye was on him, most of them hostile. But he also caught glimpses of something else in a few of their faces. Curiosity, maybe even a hint of sympathy. Not everyone here was a fanatic. If I may, Marcus said, his voice surprisingly clear in the chamber's acoustics. The utter shock of hearing him speak their language, which he'd been cramming with translation aids, bought him a precious moment of silence. You question why I am here, he continued in slow, careful Zorathian. I get it. But think about this. In just 3 days, I've witnessed your military exercises, seen your technology, and studied your culture. I've learned more about Zarathian society than most outsiders do in a lifetime. If I were really a spy, wouldn't it be smarter to keep me right where you can see me? You see? Voron sneered at the council. It speaks like a trained pet performing its tricks. That one stung, but Marcus kept his face a perfect mask of neutrality. He'd dealt with worse insults from Alliance diplomats. Enough, Caraxia commanded. We are here to discuss the attempt on the Admiral's life, not my choice in staff. The intelligence report. A younger officer brought up a holographic display of security footage. The bomb was planted during a routine maintenance check. We've ID'd 3 suspects, all with known ties to the Purists, but what? Caraxia demanded. They're dead. Suicide capsules, very professional, she noted with a cool murmur. They took themselves out before they could be questioned, which meant someone powerful wanted to cover their tracks. Voron's face was a stone mask, but Marcus saw the subtle tightening in his shoulders. Caraxia didn't miss it either. General Krex, she went on, her voice cutting through the tension. You're in charge of maintenance schedules. How did a saboteur get anywhere near a flagship? The general shifted on his feet. We're looking into every angle, my lord. See that you do, she commanded. Then her star-like gaze fell on the leader of the Purist faction. And Voron, I trust your people will cooperate fully with this investigation. Of course, he answered smoothly. We condemn any violence against our fellow Zarathians, although, he added with a sly edge, one has to wonder if this new integration hasn't created some looseness in our security. The meeting dragged on for hours, a thinly veiled political battle disguised as a security briefing. Marcus watched every move, mentally cataloging names, alliances, and the tiny tells in body language that spoke louder than any words. By the time it was over, he felt a deep exhaustion sinking into his bones. You handled that well, Caraxia said as they walked toward her private quarters. Most humans would have folded under that much hostility. I've sat through Alliance budget meetings. Now those are truly terrifying. She let out a laugh, but it sounded strained. Vorthon's influence is growing. Whether the assassination attempt failed or not, it makes him bolder. You think he was the one behind it? I know he was, she said grimly. Proving it is the hard part. They stepped into her study, and she immediately began pulling up tactical displays on the holographic interface. But he slipped up today. He showed way too much interest in you. Lucky me. Indeed. You're a symbol now, Marcus. To my supporters, you represent potential, a new way forward, adapting beyond our old traditions. But to him, you're a symbol of everything he thinks is wrong with my leadership. She turned to face him, her expression dead serious. That makes you a target. Yeah, I kind of got that when half the council looked like they wanted to use me for target practice. Which is precisely why you're moving. What now? Your current quarters are too exposed. You'll be relocated to the secure wing, right next to mine. Better surveillance, fewer access points, and my personal guard on rotation. Marcus could feel a warmth creep up his neck. Next to yours? Is that a problem? No, that's very close. She glided toward him, that dangerous predatory grace on full display. Does my proximity disturb you, Marcus? Disturb isn't exactly the word I'd choose. Oh? What word would you use? Marcus held her gaze. Complicated. Humph. She began to circle him slowly, like a predator studying its prey. Tell me, Marcus, do you regret making that joke about being my wife now? Which part? The joke itself, or the fact that I'm starting to think it wasn't really a joke at all? She stopped, standing directly in front of him, so close he could feel the heat radiating from her. Those are dangerous words. Everything about this situation is dangerous. Might as well be honest about it. For a long second, They just stood there, the air crackling with unspoken energy. Then a blaring alarm shattered the moment. It was different from before, sharper, more urgent. A combat alert. Kiraxia snarled, instantly shifting from leader to warrior. "The arena!" she hissed. "Someone's triggered an unauthorized event!" They sprinted down corridors that were rapidly filling with armed soldiers. The arena, a colossal chamber Marcus had only seen on his initial tour, was in absolute chaos. The powerful energy barriers meant to contain the fights were flickering wildly. And in the center, "Is that a throne beast?" Marcus gasped. The creature was a living nightmare, 3 times the height of a Zorathian, a mess of teeth, claws, and thick, armored plating. It let out a deafening roar that shook the very walls, and Marcus could see bodies already strewn across the sandy floor. "Someone let it out of stasis," Velith, her second-in-command, reported, appearing at their side. "The entire arena was supposed to be sealed for maintenance." Kiraxia's face was like it was carved from ice. "Voran, he's escalating." "My lord," Velith said urgently, "there are civilians trapped in there. A youth training group was on an observation tour when—" She didn't have to finish. Kiraxia was already in motion, snatching a plasma rifle from a nearby guard. "Seal every exit. No one gets out until I give the word." "You're actually going in there?" Marcus grabbed her arm, not even thinking about it. "That thing will— Those are my people in there." She cut him off, her voice like steel. "My responsibility." "Then I'm going with you." "Absolutely not. You're a human. You're fragile. And I'm your advisor, so here's my advice. Don't go in there alone." She stared at him for a solid heartbeat, then grabbed another rifle and shoved it into his chest. "Stay behind me, and try not to die." They rushed in through an access tunnel, the beast's roars echoing around them. Marcus could hear the terrified screams of young voices, and his hands tightened on the strange, heavy weapon. When they emerged onto the arena floor, it was pure chaos. The throne beast had cornered a group of young Zorathians, teenagers by the look of them, against the far wall. Their small training weapons were completely useless against its armored hide. "Hey!" Marcus yelled before his brain could catch up with his mouth. "Over here, you ugly jerk!" The beast's massive head snapped in his direction, 6 glowing eyes locking onto him with pure, predatory hatred. It charged. "Marcus, you idiot!" Kiraxia yelled. But she was already moving, firing surgically precise shots at the creature's leg joints. Marcus dove to the side as the beast's claws tore through the air where he'd just been. He fired back wildly, the plasma bolts just sizzling harmlessly against its thick hide. But it worked. The distraction gave the young trainees a chance to scramble for safety. "The eyes!" Kiraxia shouted over the roar. "Aim for the eyes!" Easier said than done when those eyes were attached to a 10-ton monster trying to turn you into a red paste. Marcus rolled, fired, and rolled again, his muscles screaming in protest. The beast was terrifyingly fast, but it was enraged now, focusing all its fury on him. And that gave Kiraxia the opening she needed. She moved like a phantom of death, placing each shot with brutal efficiency. One eye burst in a shower of ichor, then a second. The beast howled in pain, spinning toward her, and Marcus saw his chance. He steadied the rifle, held his breath, and squeezed the trigger. The bolt hit home, taking out a third eye. The monster stumbled, blinded and disoriented, and Kiraxia seized the moment. She sprinted forward, a wicked-looking blade appearing from her armor as if by magic, and launched herself into the air. The blade plunged deep into the weak spot at the base of the creature's skull. The throne beast collapsed with a ground-shaking thud. For a moment, the only sound in the arena was their own ragged breathing. Then the energy barriers hummed back to full power. Soldiers swarmed in, and medics rushed toward the injured. "That," Marcus panted, "was insane." "That," Kiraxia corrected, pulling her blade free, "was Tuesday." But she was looking at him with a glimmer of something that looked a lot like approval. "You fought well. Stupidly, but well. Coming from you, I'll take that as high praise." She stepped closer, her hand surprisingly gentle as she checked him over for injuries. You could have been killed. So could you. I'm a Zorathian. I was built for this. And I'm a human. We're stupidly brave, remember? She shook her head, but he saw a small smile playing on her lips. Stupidly brave indeed. My lord, a soldier interrupted, holding out a data pad. We found something. The beast's stasis pod was sabotaged. This was left on the control panel. Her expression hardened into granite as she read it. What is it? Marcus asked. A message, she said, her voice dangerously low. The alien lover risks our young for her pet. How many more must die because of her weakness? She handed the pad back to the soldier. Double the guard on all training facilities, and find me the person who wrote this. As the medical teams worked, Voran appeared, flanked by a group of his purest supporters. His face was a perfect mask of concern. My lord, thank the ancestors you're safe. When we heard of the attack... Save it, Voran. Kira Axia cut him off. We both know exactly what this was. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, but perhaps this tragedy just goes to show the dangers of distractions. His eyes flickered over to Marcus for a split second. A leader's focus should be on her own people, not her pets. Marcus stepped forward. Funny timing, isn't it? Right after the big council meeting. And then this happens. It's almost like someone wanted to make a point. Be careful, human, Voran sneered. You're addressing a general of the hegemony. And you're addressing the Warlord's advisor, Marcus shot back. Show some respect. The silence that fell was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Voran's hand twitched toward the weapon at his side, but Kira Axia's voice sliced through the tension like a razor. Touch him, she said simply, and you lose that hand. Voran's face went dark with rage. You threaten me? For this creature? I promise you, if you continue down this path, you'll learn what a real threat from me means. She stepped right between them, every inch the warlord of legend. Now leave before I remember that challenging my authority is treason. Voran backed away, but the look in his eyes promised this was far from over. As he and his cronies retreated, Kira Axia turned to the assembled soldiers. Let the word go out! Marcus Kane fights with us. He put his life on the line for our children. Anyone who questions his place here is questioning me! The soldiers snapped to a crisp salute, and Marcus saw a definite shift in their eyes. It wasn't full acceptance, not yet, but it was respect. He had shed blood in their arena, faced down their monsters, and in their culture, that meant something. Later, back in her private quarters, Kira Axia was cleaning a cut on his arm that he hadn't even realized he had. That was foolish, you know, she said softly, confronting Voran like that. I learned from the best. This isn't your fight, Marcus. Isn't it? He gently caught her hand in his. I'm here because of you. Your fight is my fight. She looked down at their joined hands, her expression impossible to read. You barely even know me. I know enough. Do you? She looked up, and he could see a universe of emotion swirling in those star-like eyes. I've conquered entire worlds, Marcus. I've given the orders that ended millions of lives. I'm not some misunderstood hero. I'm exactly what they call me, a warlord. And yet, he said softly, you were the first one to dive into that arena to save a bunch of kids. You go out of your way to preserve the cultures of the people you conquer. You're trying to change, to be better. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Maybe you're more than just a warlord. Careful, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You keep saying things like that, and I might actually start to believe you. Good. She leaned in, so close he could feel her breath on his skin. You complicate everything. Likewise. For a long, breathless moment, they stayed right there, hovering on the edge of something new and irreversible. She pulled away suddenly and shot to her feet. Your new quarters are ready. You need to rest. Tomorrow's going to be tough. Way tougher than fighting giant monsters because Voron is just getting started." She walked over to the window, staring out at the city she ruled. "He'll come for you directly next time," she said, almost to herself. "Let him try." She turned back to him, and her smile was a perfect mix of pride and worry. "There's that reckless bravery again." "You like it?" he teased. "Maybe." She gestured toward the door. "Go. Before I do something we'll both regret." "Are you sure we'd regret it?" he pushed. "Go, Marcus." He left, but not before he felt the heat of her gaze lock onto him. As the door slid shut, Marcus gently touched the spot on his side where she had tended to his wound. He knew he was playing with fire, caught between assassination plots and whatever this undeniable thing was growing between them. But as he settled into his new room, so close to hers that he could hear the faint sounds of her moving around, he realized there was nowhere else he'd rather be. His old joke about her being a cute wife didn't seem so funny anymore. It felt more like a prediction. The only question was whether they'd survive long enough to find out. Marcus woke up to a soft chime at his door. The clock on the wall said it was just before dawn. He grabbed the pistol Caraxia had insisted he keep and crept toward the door. "It's Velith," a muffled voice said. "We have a situation." He opened the door to see the commander looking more serious than he'd ever seen her. "What kind of situation?" "The kind where you need to come with me right now," she said, nodding at the weapon in his hand. "And bring that." They moved fast, through corridors that were already buzzing with activity. Marcus noticed security was way tighter at every checkpoint, with guards in full combat gear instead of their usual ceremonial armor. "The Ascension ceremony begins at sunset," Velith explained as they walked. "It's our most sacred ritual. The Warlord has to preside when the young warriors prove they're worthy of becoming full citizens." "Let me guess," Marcus said. "A perfect opportunity for someone to try and take a shot at her." "That's what we're thinking. Our intel suggests they're planning something big. The Warlord wants you there." "Why? I'm no bodyguard." Velith gave him a strange look he couldn't quite decipher. "She trusts you. In our culture, that means more than you can imagine." They found Caraxia in the Tactical Command Center, surrounded by her top officers. She was wearing ceremonial armor that was somehow both breathtakingly beautiful and absolutely deadly, made of a silver and black metal that shimmered like liquid starlight. "Marcus," she dismissed the others with a quick nod. "I need your human perspective." She brought up a holographic map of the ceremony grounds, a massive amphitheater, open to the stars but protected by a shimmering energy shield. "Security scans are coming up clean," she said. "Every single person has been vetted, every weapon accounted for. But my gut is screaming that something's wrong." Marcus studied the layout, trying to put himself in an assassin's shoes. "What exactly happens during the ceremony?" "The young warriors face trials of combat, wisdom, and loyalty. At the very end, I go down to the arena floor to personally welcome them as full citizens." Her jaw tightened. "It's the one time tradition demands I be completely exposed, without my personal guard." "That's insane," Marcus said. "Can't you just change the tradition? And look weak? Show fear?" She shook her head. "That would be playing right into Voron's hands." "What about the participants? You said they were vetted, but one of them could have been turned," she finished for him. "We thought of that. Each one will be scanned again right before they enter the arena." Something was still bugging Marcus. "What about after they're inside? During the ceremony?" Caraxia frowned. "What do you mean?" "In human history," he said, "some of the most successful attacks happened when the killer was already inside the perimeter. Someone who was supposed to be there. Someone nobody would look at twice until it was too late." She stared at the map, her mind racing. "The weapons for the trials, they're traditional, kept in the arena's own armory. If someone swapped one of those with a live weapon, disguised to look ceremonial, Marcus finished. No one would know. Until a young warrior suddenly pointed it at me. Her face turned to stone. Valeth, I want every single weapon in that armory inspected. Now! As Valeth hurried off, Caraxia turned back to Marcus. You'll stand with me during the ceremony. That's going to make the traditionalists furious. Let them be furious. Your being there might be enough to make an assassin think twice. She hesitated, then added in a softer voice, and I want you where I can see you. Voran's message was loud and clear. You're a target too. Worried about me? He smirked. It would be a pain to train a new human advisor, she shot back, but the genuine concern in her eyes gave her away. A few hours later, as the sun began to set, Marcus stood awkwardly in Caraxia's private armory while she picked out weapons for him. This is ridiculous, he complained, as she buckled a ceremonial blade around his waist. I barely know which end to hold. The sharp end goes into the enemy, she replied without missing a beat. Simple. Your faith in me is truly touching. She adjusted the belt, letting her hands rest on his hips for just a moment too long. You survived the throne beast. That's more than most of my trained warriors can say. I had help. Yes. Me. She stepped back, looking him over. You almost look Zarathian. Is that a compliment? Maybe. She walked over to a display on the wall and took down something he hadn't noticed before. A circlet of dark metal with a single glowing crystal in the center. Wear this. What is it? A protection seal. It's an old tradition. It marks you as being under my personal protection. She placed it on his forehead, and the metal was surprisingly warm against his skin. Anyone who tries to harm you is challenging me directly. Caraxia. Don't argue, she cut him off. It's just practical. But the way her fingers lingered on his cheek told a different story. The ceremony grounds were packed with thousands of Zarathians, the air electric with excitement. Marcus stood next to Caraxia's throne on a raised platform, trying not to fidget as thousands of eyes, some curious, many hostile, stared at him. Voran and his followers had a prime spot, their faces carefully blank. Too carefully, Marcus thought. Citizens of the hegemony! Caraxia's voice boomed across the amphitheater. Tonight, we witness the ascension of our youth. They arrive as children but will leave as warriors. The crowd roared its approval. Marcus watched the young participants file in, 50 teenagers, their faces masks of pure determination. They looked so young, despite being tall and obviously well-trained. The trial started with combat, one-on-one fights with blunted training weapons. Marcus had to admit he was impressed by their skill. These weren't just clumsy fights. They were elegant displays of martial arts. Watch the third pair, Caraxia murmured, her voice low. The tall female with the silver markings. Marcus zeroed in on her. She was good, exceptionally good, but there was something just a little off about the way she moved. Too rigid, her eyes fixed on the platform instead of her opponent. You see it too, Caraxia said quietly. She's not fighting to win the match. She's fighting to get closer to us. Or she's just nervous, Marcus offered, but he saw Caraxia's hand drift subtly toward the hilt of her blade. The combat trials ended and were followed by tests of wisdom, where they solved complex puzzles under immense pressure. Then came the final trial, loyalty. Each participant had to swear an oath while holding an ancient weapon, a symbol of their pledge to die for the hegemony. The weapons were brought out on ceremonial racks, long spears that hummed with a soft, low energy. One by one, the participants took a spear, forming a wide semicircle in front of the platform. And now, Caraxia announced, rising from her throne, I will descend to welcome our new warriors. Wait, Marcus whispered, grabbing her arm. Something's wrong. I have to. Tradition demands it. To hell with tradition. Look at the weapons." She paused, her eyes following his. All the ceremonial spears glowed with the same gentle blue light. Except for one. The spear held by the tall female warrior had a slightly different shimmer, a flicker you could barely see unless you were looking right for it. "Guards," Caraxia started to say, but it was too late. The female warrior exploded into motion, and the ceremonial spear flared to life, revealing itself as a fully charged plasma lance. She didn't lunge for Caraxia. She lunged for Marcus, the weapon screaming as it cut through the air. He reacted purely on instinct, shoving Caraxia backward as he raised his own flimsy ceremonial blade. The plasma lance sliced through it like it was made of butter, the intense heat blistering his hands. The assassin drove forward, murder in her eyes. And then Caraxia was there, moving with a speed that defied belief. Her own blade sang as it swept up, knocking the lance aside just before it could hit him. The two warriors became a blur of silver and black, locked in a lethal dance as the crowd screamed in panic and confusion. "Protect the Warlord!" someone yelled, and the entire arena erupted into chaos. Guards flooded the floor. Some of the young warriors scattered, terrified, while others bravely formed a defensive circle, not even sure who the enemy was. In the middle of the chaos, Marcus saw more movement. Assassins, disguised as guards, were closing in on them. "Behind you!" he yelled. Caraxia spun, her blade silencing one attacker permanently, but more were coming. The ceremony had turned into a full-blown ambush. Marcus scooped up a fallen guard's plasma rifle, his brief military training kicking in on pure adrenaline. He saw an assassin coming up on Caraxia's blind side and fired. The bolt hit the attacker dead center. "The platform!" Caraxia yelled, fighting her way back toward him, back to higher ground. They stood back to back, covering each other's every move. Marcus was hopelessly outmatched by every single fighter that came at them. But he had one thing going for him. They all underestimated the human. All those years in the cockpit gave him a sixth sense for navigating chaos. He used it now, dodging attacks and creating openings for Caraxia to smash through. A searing pain ripped across his side as an assassin's blade found its mark. He staggered, and the enemy swarmed in. A furious roar echoed through the arena. It was Caraxia. She moved like a storm, a whirlwind of divine anger cutting down anyone between them. The assassin looming over Marcus suddenly lost his head in one clean, brutal swipe. "You're hurt!" she growled, dragging him behind a piece of rubble. "I'm fine," he lied, clamping a hand over the bleeding gash. "You foolish human." But her touch was surprisingly gentle as she inspected the wound. The tide of the battle was finally turning as loyal guards formed a line, pushing the assassins back. The female warrior who had led the charge lay dead, her high-tech weapon fizzling out beside her. "My Warlord," Velith reported, her armor spattered with alien gore. "The arena is secure. 12 assassins down, 3 in custody." "Voran," Caraxia demanded. "Vanished, my lord. Slipped away right before the attack started." Of course he did. She helped Marcus stand, letting him lean heavily on her. "Clear the grounds. The ceremony is over." As medics rushed toward them, Caraxia turned to the stunned crowd, her voice ringing out over the chaos. "Let everyone see! Enemies of the hegemony tried to strike us down during our most sacred ritual. They have failed. They will always fail. We are Zarathian. We do not break!" The crowd erupted in a deafening roar. But Marcus saw something else in their faces. Many were staring at him differently now. He had bled for their warlord, fought at her side. The human had earned their respect in the only way a Zarathian could understand. Later, in the med bay, healers patched him up with tech that itched more than it hurt. Caraxia paced back and forth like a caged lion. 12 assassins, she seethed, recruited from our own young warriors. How could we have missed it? Because Voran is smarter than you thought, Marcus said. He knew you'd vet the participants, so he turned them after they were cleared. Probably threatened their families. That woman? She came for you first, not me. I was the easier target. Take out the weak human, crush your morale, create a distraction. He winced as a healer applied a salve that burned like acid. Plus, it would have fit his story perfectly. See? The alien brought death to our ceremony. Instead, the alien saved your life. She stopped her pacing and stared at him with that burning intensity. You shoved me out of the way. You took a blade meant for me. Instinct. Liar. She waved the healers away, waiting until the room was empty. Why? Marcus thought about making a joke, but the look in her eyes demanded the truth. Because if I lost you, it would break something. Not just for your people, but for me. In 2 long strides, she was in front of him, her hands framing his face. You impossible, fragile, ridiculously brave human. You forgot cute, and then her lips crashed against his. It wasn't a gentle kiss. Caraxia didn't do gentle. It was fierce, possessive, tasting of the battlefield, and an electric current that made the pain in his side vanish. When she finally pulled away, they were both breathless. That was, Marcus began. Long overdue, she finished. You've been turning my world upside down since the day you crash-landed here, making me feel things I buried long ago, making me want things I have no right to want. Like what? Like keeping you. Not as an advisor, or a pet, or some political symbol, but as more. That sounds suspiciously like an emotion, Warlord. Must be my bad influence. She gently traced his jawline. This makes everything complicated. Everything about us is already complicated. True. She kissed him again, softer this time, but just as deep. Voran will use this against us. Let him try. He lost today. He'll be back. And next time, she pulled away, her warrior mask sliding back into place. I need to speak with the council. This attack changes everything on the political map. And us? He asked. What about us? Her expression softened with a small smile. You're mine now, Marcus Kane. That kiss. In my culture, it's as binding as any vow. You might have mentioned that sooner. Would it have changed anything? No. Then why waste breath? She walked to the door, then paused. Your current quarters are not secure enough. You'll be moved to mine. Tonight. That's very direct. I am Zarathian. We take what we want. Her smile turned wickedly predatory. And I want you where I can keep you safe. Among other things. She was gone before he could think of a reply, leaving Marcus touching his lips, wondering how a joke about marriage had somehow led to this. It was possession, protection, and a partnership all rolled into one. The medics came back to finish their work, but his thoughts were a million miles away, lost in starry eyes, fierce kisses, and the political firestorm they had just ignited. Tomorrow would be a mess. Voran would regroup. The council would be in an uproar, and their new relationship would become another weapon for their enemies to use. But tonight he was moving into the Warlord's private chambers, and she had kissed him like she was conquering a planet. He'd definitely had worse days. A blaring alarm from the stellar citadel ripped Marcus from a deep sleep. Next to him, Caraxia was already on her feet, her warrior senses snapping her to full alert in an instant. Status report, she commanded into her comlink, strapping on her armor with practiced speed. Multiple Alliance ships just dropped out of hyperspace at the border, my lord, Valeth's voice crackled. They're broadcasting diplomatic codes, but they're holding an attack formation. The Alliance, Marcus whispered, a cold knot forming in his stomach. What are they doing here? Caraxia gave him a look that was 1 part sympathy and 2 parts strategy. Perhaps, she said, they've come looking for their lost pilot. They hurried to the command center. A hive of controlled chaos. The main view screen showed a fleet of 20 Alliance vessels parked just outside Zorathian territory. Marcus knew the formation instantly. A diplomatic group with a very heavy military escort. "Incoming transmission," the comms officer announced. "They are requesting a direct channel to the Warlord." "Put it on screen," Caraxia ordered. The image flickered, replaced by the face of Admiral Sarah Torres. Marcus knew her by reputation. Smart, fair, and an absolute bulldog when it came to protecting Alliance personnel. "Warlord Caraxia," Torres began, her voice crisp and formal. "I am here about Captain Marcus Kane. We detected his distress beacon in your territory 2 weeks ago. We are here to demand his immediate return." Caraxia's face was a mask of calm. "Captain Kane is no longer your concern, Admiral." "I disagree. He is an Alliance citizen." Torres paused, her gaze sweeping the command deck before locking onto Marcus, who was standing near the throne. Her professional demeanor cracked, replaced by a flash of surprise, relief, and then utter confusion. "Captain Kane, you're alive." "Hello, Admiral," Marcus said, choosing his words with care. "As you can see, I'm okay." "Okay? You're standing on the bridge of an enemy warship wearing... what is that? Zorathian formal wear?" "It's complicated." "Uncomplicated," Caraxia cut in. "Captain Kane is my advisor. He is here by his own choice." "His own choice?" Torres's voice was dripping with disbelief. "A human willingly serving the Zorathian warlord? Captain, are you being held against your will? Blink twice if you're in danger." "Admiral, I am not under duress," Marcus interrupted firmly. "My ship was lost in a gravity well. The warlord saved my life, and I have chosen to stay." "Chosen?" Torres scrutinized him through the screen. "And that marking on your neck, that collar. What is that?" Marcus subconsciously touched the protective seal he now wore every day. "It's a symbol of my diplomatic status here." "It looks like a mark of ownership." "Admiral Torres," Caraxia's voice was dangerously low. "You are in Zorathian space. I would advise you to be very careful with your words. And I would advise you to return our citizen before this diplomatic mission turns into a military one. He is not my prisoner. If he wants to leave, he can." Caraxia turned her gaze on Marcus, her expression impossible to read. "The choice is yours, Marcus." The entire command center went dead silent. Marcus could feel every single eye on him, Zorathian warriors, and through the screen, the faces of his former comrades. His old life was right there, just one sentence away. Safety. Friends. Home. But home had started to mean something different over the last few weeks. It meant sparring in the mornings as Caraxia taught him how to really fight. It meant late-night debates over strategy and philosophy. It meant nights spent tracing the star charts tattooed on her skin. "I appreciate the rescue, Admiral," Marcus said at last, his voice steady. "But I'm right where I need to be." Torres's face hardened into granite. "Captain, that's an order. You will return to the fleet." "With all due respect, Admiral, I resigned my commission the second my ship came apart. I'm a civilian." "This is a huge mistake, Marcus. Whatever power she has over you, the only power she has over me is the power I gave her," Marcus stated, leaving no room for argument. "I'm not leaving." Torres stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Then her eyes flicked back to Caraxia. "If he comes to any harm, then you would have to get in line behind me," Caraxia replied coolly. "He is under my protection." "Protection, right." Torres shook her head in disgust. "Marcus, when this all goes sideways, and trust me, it will, the Alliance will still be here." The transmission cut out, plunging the room into a thick silence. "Well," Marcus said with a weak smile, "that could have been worse." "You chose to stay," Caraxia said, her voice soft. "Did you ever doubt that I would?" I gave you the choice. That is what is important. She turned back to her command staff. Continue to monitor the Alliance fleet. The second one of them crosses the border. I want to know. As the crew returned to their duties, a silky voice sliced through the noise. How very convenient. Voran stood in the doorway, flanked by his usual cronies, a smug look on his face. He had clearly seen the whole thing. An Alliance fleet just happens to appear at our border as our internal politics are at a tipping point, he mused loudly. It makes one wonder if our human guest sent them an invitation. Be careful, Voran, Caraxia warned, her voice like ice. That sounds a lot like an accusation. I'm just looking at the timing of it all. First, someone tries to take out their leaders, which conveniently makes things better for humans. Now his own people show up, putting pressure on from the outside. Maybe Captain Kane is a whole lot smarter than we've been giving him credit for. Marcus stepped right up. Look, if I wanted to bail, I just had the perfect chance. But I stayed. What other proof do you need? Proof? Voran let out a cold smile. That you're just playing a much bigger game. The Alliance doesn't scramble fleets for one pilot. You're way more important than you let on. Or they actually care about their people, Caraxia cut in. A lesson you could stand to learn. The jab hit its mark. Voran's hand twitched, hovering over his weapon. You're crossing a line. But before he could finish, a different kind of alarm blared through the citadel. It was the kind of alarm Marcus had come to learn meant one thing. Deep trouble. My lord, an officer yelled, his voice tight with panic. We've detected a massive energy signature. Something is ripping through hyperspace. Something huge. The main view screen flickered, showing a swirling vortex in space that was growing bigger every second. When the image finally focused, Marcus felt his mouth go dry. That wasn't a ship. It was a monster. A living creature the size of a battlecruiser, covered in writhing tentacles and glowing patches of bioluminescence. It moved through the void like a predator swimming through water, and it was heading straight for them. A void leviathan, someone whispered, their voice trembling with horror. That's impossible, Voran snapped, his usual composure cracking. They're just myths. Apparently not, Caraxia said, her face grim. She turned to her command crew. Get all defensive systems online now. Start evacuating the civilian areas. What is that thing? Marcus asked, his eyes glued to the terrifying sight on the screen. It's a nightmare from our most ancient stories, Caraxia answered. The legends say they're drawn to huge gatherings of psychic energy. The kind of energy created by, say, massive political chaos. You mean, we called it here? Marcus asked. Are fighting? It's possible, she said. Or maybe someone called it on purpose. She shot a sharp glance at Voran, who had turned ghostly pale. You can't possibly think This thing threatens every single one of us. Yes, it does, Caraxia agreed, which means we either work together or we die alone. Make your choice. Fast. Just then, the Leviathan slammed into the Citadel's outer shields. The entire station groaned and shuddered, and the lights flickered wildly. On the screen, they could see tentacles covered in what looked like rows of razor-sharp teeth scraping against the energy field. Shields are holding at 70%, an officer shouted. But it's already adapting to our frequency. Of course it is, Marcus mumbled to himself, then spoke up. The Alliance fleet. They use different shield technologies. If we could coordinate our systems? You want to invite them into our sovereign space? Voran spat. I want to live, Marcus shot back. That monster out there doesn't give a damn about our politics. Caraxia was already on the move. Open a direct channel to Admiral Torres. Torres's face appeared on the screen, her annoyed expression quickly melting into shock as she saw the chaos behind them. What in God's name is that? It's a void leviathan, Caraxia stated bluntly. Our shields aren't going to hold much longer. I'm proposing a temporary alliance. You want our help? Now? I want your shield frequencies, Caraxia clarified. If we can create overlapping fields with different energy signatures, we might be able to confuse the creature long enough to make it leave. Torres stared at her for a long, hard second. "And what do I get in return? You have my word that Captain Kane is here because he chooses to be. No tricks, no games." "Your word?" "My word is Warlord," Caraxia said, her voice like steel. "I don't give it lightly." Another violent shudder rocked the citadel. "Shields at 50%, someone yelled. "Admiral," Marcus said, stepping into the frame, "please, there are millions of lives on this station." Torres's gaze softened just a little. "You really have gone native, haven't you, Kane?" She turned to someone just off screen. "Transmit our shield harmonics and bring the fleet into a support position." What came next was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Human and Zarathian engineers who were enemies just minutes before were now working side by side, their deep-seated distrust erased by the primal need to survive. Marcus found himself acting as a bridge between the two, his unique position suddenly making him the most valuable person in the room. "The phase variance has to match." "No, not that frequency. It'll cause a feedback loop," he explained, his hands flying across a console. Caraxia directed the military side of things, while Voron, credit where it's due, organized the civilian evacuations. The snake proved to be surprisingly good at his job when people's lives were actually at stake. "Shields reconfigured," a tech announced. "Putting it online now." The new overlapping energy field flickered to life just as the Leviathan finally smashed through their original shields. The monster hit the new, layered barrier and physically recoiled, letting out a silent scream that echoed like tortured metal through the void. "It's working!" someone cried out in relief. But the creature wasn't giving up. It pulled back, its entire body pulsing with an angry, bright glow. When it slammed into the shields again, the force of the impact knocked everyone off their feet. "It's learning too fast," the lead technician reported, his voice grim. "We need a new plan." Marcus stared at the creature on the screen, his mind racing. "What if we stop trying to fight it?" he said suddenly. "What if we try to lead it somewhere else?" "Explain," Caraxia commanded. "You said it's drawn to psychic energy, right? This whole citadel is packed with terrified people, all of them broadcasting fear. We're basically a giant dinner bell." "But what if we gave it a bigger, louder dinner bell?" he asked. A spark of understanding lit up in her eyes. "The asteroid field. There's an old mining station out there. It's been abandoned for years, but the core is still powered. If we could somehow amplify its energy signature." "Make it look juicier than we do," Marcus finished. "That's completely insane," Voron protested. "The amount of power that would take. We'd need both fleets focusing their energy." Caraxia cut him off with a look. She turned back to the view screen. "Admiral Torres, we're going to need your help with one last thing." It took several precious minutes to coordinate, minutes they barely had as the Leviathan kept hammering away. But finally, both the human and Zarathian fleets focused their main energy projectors on the distant mining station, unleashing a massive psychic flare. The result was instantaneous. The creature stopped its attack. Its massive sensory organs swiveled, turning toward the new, powerful signal. Then, with a movement that looked almost hungry, it turned away from the citadel and sped off toward the asteroid field. "It's working," an officer confirmed. "The Leviathan is moving away." A massive cheer erupted through the command center. For a moment, humans and Zarathians were clapping each other on the back, some even hugging, before they remembered they were supposed to be enemies and pulled away awkwardly. "Well," Admiral Torres said from the screen, her voice laced with dry amusement, "that was certainly educational. I suppose we should—" She was cut off as Voron suddenly drew his sidearm and aimed it straight at Marcus. "Now, we get back to reality. The human has served his purpose." The room went dead silent. Zarathian guards snapped their rifles up, their eyes darting between Voron and their warlord, completely unsure who they were supposed to shoot. "Lower your weapon, Voron," Caraxia commanded, her voice dangerously calm. "No, don't you get it? This is exactly what I was talking about. He makes us weak, dependent on outsiders. The Leviathan only came because our strength was failing. Our strength is what just saved us, Marcus said carefully, staring down the barrel of the plasma pistol pointed at his chest. Zarathian and human, working together. Empty words. Voron's finger tightened on the trigger. Words won't bring back what we've lost. You're right, Caraxia said, catching everyone by surprise. We have lost something. Voron's lips curled into a triumphant smile, but then his face fell as she continued. We've lost the luxury of being alone. The galaxy is changing, Voron. New threats are coming, and they demand new ways of thinking. Adapting isn't a weakness. It's how we survive. You talk about survival while you take an alien to your bed, he spat. I talk about survival while I look toward the future, she roared back. She took a slow step forward, positioning herself slightly between Voron and Marcus. Kill him, and you kill any hope our people have of ever being more than just conquerors. Maybe that's a price worth paying. Then you can pay it yourself. In one impossibly fast motion, Caraxia drew her own blade and sent it spinning through the air. It slammed into Voron's pistol, knocking it from his grasp. Before he could even blink, she was on him, her hand clamped around his throat, lifting him clear off the floor with terrifying ease. You forget your place, she snarled. I am Warlord, not because of some old tradition or backroom politics, but because I am the strongest. Challenge that again, and you will not live to regret it. She dropped him, and he crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. You choose him over your own kind. I choose the future over the past, she declared. Guards, take him to the detention block. He will stand trial for high treason. As Voron was dragged away, still screaming curses, Caraxia turned back to the screen. Admiral Torres had watched the entire scene unfold with a look of fascination. Admiral, thank you again for your help. You are welcome to stay while we get our shields repaired. But after that, I must ask you to leave our space, and Marcus stays with me, by his choice. Torres looked from Caraxia to Marcus and back again, a hint of understanding in her eyes. I see. Well, Captain, or whatever you are now, try not to start any more galaxy-wide wars. I'll do my best, Admiral. And Warlord, take care of him. He's one of our best. He's one of mine now, Caraxia replied, her voice firm. I protect what is mine. Long after the transmission ended and some sense of normalcy had returned, Marcus found himself alone with Caraxia in her private study. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving him feeling shaky. You could have just let me go, he said softly. Avoided this whole mess. Could I? She asked, moving closer and gently cupping his face in her hands. Tell me the truth, Marcus. Could I really have just let you go? He leaned into her touch. That thing, the Leviathan. Do you think it will come back? Maybe, she said, but if it does, we'll be ready. Together. She kissed him, a soft, lingering kiss. You brilliant, impossible human. You saved every one of us today. We saved us, he corrected her. Zarathian and human. Yes. She pulled back slightly, her star-lit eyes shining with emotion. The Council is going to fight me on this, but after today, not even they can deny that we are stronger together. You've given me the proof I needed to force real change. Happy to help you overthrow centuries of tradition. He smiled. Overthrow is such a harsh word. I prefer aggressive renovation, she said with a sly grin, before her expression turned serious again. Voron won't be the last one to challenge us. This new path we're on, it's going to be dangerous. Good thing I like danger, he said. Good thing indeed. She walked to the large window, looking out as the Alliance fleet began to pull away. "Your people will be back. They'll have questions. The whole galaxy is going to be watching to see what we do next." Marcus came up behind her, wrapping an arm around her waist as they looked out at the stars. "Then let's give them something to talk about," she whispered, a perfect blend of warrior and woman. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? What we've started?" He pulled her closer. "Changed everything," he said. She smiled against his chest. "Changed everything. There's no turning back now." He tilted her chin up. "Would you even want to?" "Never," she breathed, kissing him with a fierce possessiveness that staked her claim. "You're mine, Marcus Kane. My advisor, my conscience, my partner. The galaxy can just deal with it." Outside, the Alliance fleet began to pull away, leaving the space between humans and Zarathians just a little smaller. The Void Leviathan was gone, but the real changes were just getting started. Marcus had once joked about her being a cute wife. Now, as he held her watching the stars, he realized that sometimes jokes have a funny way of becoming prophecies. And sometimes, prophecies change entire worlds. The war hit them like a thief in the night. Marcus jolted awake as the entire citadel shuddered violently, alarms screaming bloody murder on every level. Caraxia was already strapping on her armor, her face a mask of grim determination as reports flooded her neural link. "What's happening?" Marcus demanded, grabbing his own gear with the practiced ease of a man who knew his peace was temporary. "Voran," she said, her voice tight. "He escaped during a prisoner transfer. His followers have launched a full-scale rebellion." She paused, her eyes distant as new data streamed in. "And they're not alone. The consortium has joined them. They're hitting 3 of our frontier worlds at the same time." "The consortium? But they signed non-aggression pacts." "Those pacts mean nothing when they smell blood in the water," she retorted, securing her plasma blade to her hip. "They think our contamination by human influence has made us weak. It's time to prove them wrong." The command center was a storm of organized chaos. Holographic maps flared with battle sites across Zarathian space, ships exploding in silence, cities burning, and defensive lines collapsing. "My Warlord," General Krex reported, his earlier skepticism of Marcus now burned away by the grim reality of war. "Vorthon's forces have seized the orbital defense platforms around Kareth Prime. He's demanding you abdicate the throne." He shot a nervous glance at Marcus. "And the human's execution?" "Of course he is," Caraxia said, her eyes scanning the tactical displays. "What's our fleet status?" "The 3rd and 5th fleets are tied up at the frontier. The 1st is here, ready to defend us. But if we leave the Citadel, we lose our entire command structure," Krex explained. She turned to Marcus. "Your thoughts, advisor?" Marcus leaned over the displays, his mind racing. "They're spread too thin. Hitting 3 systems at once, that's not a sustainable strategy, not unless they have help from the inside." Caraxia finished his thought, a cold fury in her eyes. "Traitors in our own ranks, feeding them intel." "My Warlord," an officer named Velith interrupted. "Priority 1 message from the Alliance. Admiral Torres is offering help." "Put her through," Caraxia ordered. Torres's face appeared on the main screen, her expression dead serious. "Warlord, we've been monitoring the developing situation. The Consortium's attack violates 7 different treaties. The Alliance Council has authorized me to offer full military support." "And what's the price, Admiral?" Caraxia asked, never one to beat around the bush. "No price. Marcus was right. Sometimes cooperation is just another word for survival," Torres said, then allowed a small, grim smile. "Besides, the Consortium has been getting a little too bold near our border colonies. We'd rather stop them with you now than fight them by ourselves later." "Your help is appreciated, Admiral." As they started coordinating their forces, Marcus saw something. A ghost in the data. Caraxia, look at this. The attack patterns. They aren't random. They're hurting our fleets. She studied the displays, her eyes widening as she understood. Away from the Nexus Gate. The Nexus Gate, an ancient artifact that allowed ships to travel vast distances in the blink of an eye. If Voron got his hands on that, he could strike anywhere, anytime. Velith, she snapped. Redirect the Second Fleet to the Nexus immediately. Too late, Krex reported, his voice heavy. Sensors are picking up a massive fleet dropping out of hyperspace near the gate. They're, My Warlord, those are hegemony transponder codes. It's our own mothballed reserve fleet. Voran's been planning this for years, Caraxia said, her voice dangerously quiet. Building a secret army, just waiting for the perfect moment. The moment you took a human as a lover, someone muttered from the back of the room. Caraxia's head whipped around, but her reply was drowned out as the Citadel rocked from another direct hit. On the screens, enemy ships swarmed past their shattered outer defenses. They're making a run for the command spire, an officer yelled. Boarding craft are inbound. Then let's roll out the welcome mat, Caraxia growled, activating the Citadel's internal defense systems. All combat personnel to your posts. Protect the civilian sectors at all costs. She turned to Marcus, her eyes softening for just a second. You should go. Evacuate with the non-combatants. Not a chance, Marcus shot back. We've had this argument. I'm staying with you. She looked like she wanted to argue, but they were out of time. She just nodded. Fine. Then arm yourself properly. This isn't going to be like the arena. The first wave hit 20 minutes later. Voran's elite soldiers, their gear boosted with consortium tech, poured through the gaping holes in the hull. The Citadel's defenders met them with a cold, disciplined fury, turning every corridor into a death trap. Marcus fought at Caraxia's side, their movements a seamless dance of death. She was the blade, a whirlwind of lethal grace. He was the shield, covering her six, using his unique blend of human and Zorathian tactics to direct their forces. Marcus! Velith's voice crackled over the comms. Consortium forces are breaking through to the civilian shelters in Section 7. We're outnumbered 3-1. Go, Caraxia commanded before he could even speak. I can hold them here. Seeing his hesitation, she added, That's an order, advisor. Save our people. Marcus ran, grabbing every scattered defender he could find along the way. Section 7 was pure chaos. Consortium shock troops were advancing on shelter doors, behind which huddled thousands of families. On pure instinct, he threw himself between the enemy and the civilians. To me, he yelled in perfect Zerathon. Form a line. We hold here. The defenders, mostly terrified young soldiers and civilian volunteers, hesitated for a second. But then they recognized him, the human who had bled for their warlord, the man who had faced down the Void Leviathan. And they rallied. The fight that followed was the most brutal thing Marcus had ever experienced. This wasn't a duel. It was a meat grinder. But he held the line, using every dirty trick Caraxia had ever taught him, every instinct he had. When the consortium soldiers finally broke through, Marcus met them with the raw fury of a cornered animal. A plasma bolt seared his shoulder, spinning him around. Another shot clipped his ribs, stealing his breath. But he kept fighting, kept pushing himself forward, a human wall between the monsters and the innocent people behind him. For the Warlord! Someone screamed, and the cry was picked up by the others. For the hegemony! For Kane! Hearing his own name used as a battle cry almost made him lose focus. But just then, Alliance Marines stormed into the corridor, their rifles spitting fire. Torres's people had arrived just in the nick of time. You look like hell, Captain, a Marine sergeant grunted, dropping a consortium trooper. Feel worse, Marcus gasped, gratefully accepting a stimpak. The Warlord is still fighting in the command sector. What are your orders? Marcus almost laughed. An Alliance Marine asking him for orders. Help me get these civilians clear. Then we push back and retake command." They fought their way back through the citadel, their small group growing into a small army of Zorathians, humans, and a few other aliens caught in the crossfire. They found Caraxia exactly where they'd left her, surrounded, but unbroken. Her armor was cracked and stained, but her eyes blazed with an unholy light. Voran himself was leading the charge, his weapons crackling with stolen power. "Ah, the pet returns," Voran sneered, parrying a vicious strike from Caraxia. "Have you come to watch your alien filth die?" Marcus shot him in the back. It wasn't glorious. It wasn't a dramatic duel. It was brutally practical, and it sent Voran stumbling right onto Caraxia's waiting blade. "That's for calling her filth," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. Voran collapsed, a look of pure shock and betrayal on his face. Seeing their leader fall, his forces hesitated. That was all the opening they needed. "Push them back!" Caraxia roared, pressing the attack. "Drive them from our home!" The battle quickly turned into a rout. Leaderless and caught between furious defenders and fresh alliance reinforcements, the rebel army simply fell apart. Within hours, the citadel was secure, but the war was a long way from being over. In the quiet aftermath, as medics patched up their wounds, Caraxia and Marcus stood before what was left of the ruling council. Many chairs were empty, their owners either dead or exposed as traitors. "The old ways have failed us," Caraxia announced, her voice ringing with authority despite her exhaustion. "Our isolation made us vulnerable. Our traditions made us predictable. Voran used both against us." "So what do you propose?" a cautious elder asked. "Full integration, not just with the humans, but with any race willing to stand for peace. The galaxy has proven it won't leave us alone, so it's time we became a part of it." "The rebels still hold 3 worlds," General Krex reminded her, "and the consortium is gathering for an even bigger assault." "Then we take the war to them," she said, turning to Marcus, "with our new allies." Admiral Torres, joining by hologram, nodded sharply. "The Alliance Council has already approved joint operations. Your enemies are now our enemies." "And that terrifies them," Marcus added. Voran's entire platform was built on the idea of Zorathian superiority. That's a hard story to sell when you see humans and Zorathians fighting and dying for each other as equals. The campaign that came next would go down in history as the Unity War. It was Zorathian strength blended with human ingenuity, creating military tactics that neither side could have dreamed of on their own. And Marcus found himself right in the middle of it all, translating not just words, but entire philosophies. They took back the first world in 3 days, its people rising up against the rebels the moment they saw human medics treating wounded Zorathian children. The second planet fell after Marcus used the hunting patterns of a local space monster to lure the enemy fleet into a trap. By the time they got to the third world, the rebels were practically surrendering before the battle even started. The consortium, seeing how things were going, tucked tail and ran back to their own territory, suddenly very interested in talking about those treaties they had broken. But it was during the last big fight that it all almost came crashing down. Marcus was on the command deck, coordinating troops on the ground, when the alarms started screaming. A massive consortium warship that had been hiding in the planet's shadow opened fire on Caxia's flagship. He could only watch in horror as her shields collapsed, the hull ripped open, and escape pods shot out into space, only to be mercilessly hunted down by the enemy ship. "No!" she breathed, watching the battle unfold on a view screen, her forces being overwhelmed. Without a second thought, Marcus sprinted toward the hangars. "Give me your fastest fighter!" he yelled at a stunned guard. He wasn't a combat pilot, but pure, unfiltered rage was a pretty good substitute for training. He launched the small ship and flew straight into the storm of enemy fire. He was so small they ignored him, focusing on the massive Zorathian warships. He pushed the fighter to its limits, emptying every missile he had into the engine core of the enemy dreadnought. The resulting explosion sent his ship tumbling through space. Through his spinning vision, he saw one last escape pod, Caraxia's, getting pulled into the nearby planet's atmosphere. He angled his wrecked ship and dove in right after her. The landing was less of a landing and more of a controlled crash. Marcus dragged his bruised body from the wreckage and found her pod, cracked open. He rushed over to find her inside, terrifyingly still. He gently lifted her into his arms, relieved to find she was still breathing. As he carried her away from the smoking debris, he knew one thing for sure. Things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. "No," he breathed, pulling the debris off her. "You are not allowed to leave me." Her eyes slowly fluttered open, struggling to focus on his face. "You foolish human. You could have run," she rasped. "Not a chance." He held her tight as the glow of rescue ships filled the sky. "You're stuck with me now, remember? The cute wife material," he teased gently. She managed a weak laugh that turned into a bloody cough. "Still a terrible joke," she whispered. But she was alive. They both were. Weeks later, inside the grand, rebuilt throne room of the Stellar Citadel, Caxia stood tall before the assembled leaders of both the Hegemony and the Alliance. Her brand-new armor, a joint human-Zarathian design, was lighter and more flexible, yet just as intimidating as her old suit. "Today, we begin a new chapter," she declared, her voice ringing with authority. "The Zarathian Hegemony and the Human Alliance have signed more than a treaty. We have forged a partnership. Our power combined, our futures forever linked." The agreement they signed was unlike any other in history. It detailed military cooperation, cultural exchanges, and shared technology. But for Marcus, who stood watching from his position beside her throne, the politics were far less important than what she said next. "Furthermore," Caxia went on, a small smile touching her lips, "to truly seal this new alliance, I am announcing my official bonding to Marcus Kane, who has proven himself to be a true warrior, a wise advisor, and my partner in all things." A wave of noise swept through the hall, cheers from the humans and younger Zarathians, but dead, shocked silence from the old traditionalists. Marcus felt his face flush hot as she pulled him to her side. "A little warning would have been nice," he muttered under his breath. "And ruin the surprise?" she whispered back, before kissing him right there in front of the entire assembly, a fierce, possessive kiss that shattered every rule of royal decorum. When she finally pulled away, she whispered for only him to hear, "You called me cute, wife. I decided to make it official." "That was a joke," he said, still dazed. "The best truths always start that way." Admiral Torres was the first to come forward and congratulate them, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "From a simple survey pilot to alien royalty. That's quite the career change, Kane." "I'm just as surprised as you are, Admiral," Marcus replied. "No, you're not," she said with a knowing smile. "I saw the way you looked at her on that very first day. You were a goner from the moment you made that stupid joke." Later that night, long after the formal celebrations had turned into a massive party down below, Marcus and Caxia stood together on a private balcony, watching the combined fleets orbit the Citadel. Human and Zarathian ships floated side by side in a way that would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. "Any regrets?" she asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Never," he answered, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Although I still think you'd be a much cuter wife than a warlord." "I can be both," she said, turning in his arms. Her stellar eyes shone with a universe of promises. "The galaxy needs its warlord. But you, Marcus Kane, you get the wife." "Lucky me," he grinned. "Yes," she agreed, pulling him into a deep kiss that felt like the beginning of forever. "Very lucky indeed." Below them, two completely different civilizations were starting the long, difficult process of becoming one people. It was going to take a lot of time, a ton of patience, and probably a few more battles along the way. But as Marcus held his warrior wife, watching the stars drift by, he knew they had already won the only war that ever really mattered, the war against fear, against being alone, and against the prison of old traditions. And to think, it all started with a ridiculous joke about a cute wife. It just goes to show you, sometimes the universe has a pretty good sense of humor.